Okay, I think everything's working. So today we have the Kettle Falls Governor Cup champion was partners missing, Craig Bircher and Donnie Ghramm. They won last year also, so back-to-back titles. Um,
Yeah.
they are definitely tuned in up there, but I think Donnie before last year had, maybe I'm wrong on this, you hadn't actually won this until last year, right? But you
The
placed
Governor's Cup.
high, or
Yeah,
had
I've
you won?
actually. This is the fourth time we have
Oh,
won the
this is the
Governor's
fourth.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
Cup.
Don't be selling him short
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
well, maybe it was his part normal. He fishes with a few different guys. Maybe it was
Yeah.
Ron had never won it until last year or a couple
Ron's
years ago.
Ron actually won this tournament. It's I don't know the date, but it was a while ago. But Ron won the tournament. Um, Craig and I have actually won. This was the fourth year we've won the Governor's Cup, and then actually we've been pretty successful on this body of water. When the tournament was out of Two Rivers, we actually won the Spokane Championship twice as well. So we've been pretty successful up here around.
Sounds like it. Congrats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your team never goes cheap in the Calcutta.
Yeah.
It's always
Yeah,
there's always about 4 teams that go really high. And speaking of
Yeah.
that Calcutta, before we get too far into it, I would love to see that in every tournament somehow because it adds so much more fun, and the public can come and get involved.
Mhm.
And that's why the kettle tournament's my favorite is because of the Calcutta. We haven't been able to do it the last couple of years, and it was so cool to be able to do it again this year.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it felt like everything was back to normal.
Explain it so that everybody knows. I know you said the public can come, but explain
I'll
what
let
it is.
Donnie explain it. He's probably better at it.
I'm a better fisherman than a Calcutta explainer, but basically the Calcutta is every fisherman is up for auction for day two, for their day two weight. So your day one weight is just kind of I guess a signal of whether or not you're on them or your potential,
Right.
But so you're up for auction. There's a floor bid. So anybody that doesn't get bid on, somebody bought the floor and they get the floor. So if Chad, nobody bid on Chad, which that wouldn't happen. But if nobody bid on Chad, whoever bought the floor would get Chad. And if he won the next day, that person would get 100% of the Calcutta money. So the way it works now, if I went up for auction, Chad bought me, and we had the biggest weight on day two, Chad would get 70% of the money, and
Right.
the fisherman would get 30% of the money. So
Right.
basically, a lot of guys try to buy themselves, and actually this year Craig and I, thanks to him, he was raising his hand a lot, but we bought ourselves and had the biggest weight on day two. And so we got 100% of the Calcutta money.
It's a nice bonus. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good thing. These guys do a really good job at this tournament, and I think they do a good job. They got some great ideas for next year. They're gonna try to revitalize it a little bit, and it's a fun.
I agree.
It is.
It was well set up this year. They had all the raffles going on.
Yeah.
It was
Little
well
booths
done.
And that's the nice thing about it. It's like we talked about before. When you get the city or town or whatever behind it, that makes a difference too, because you got them pumping a little bit of I don't know, notoriety or advertising or whatever, and it's good to see the community be involved in something like that.
Yeah. I think you're right, Lonnie, when you said probably one thing we could have improved on is a little bit of communication. Social networking, I guess, a little bit, the results and some of that stuff. They do have, the leaderboard up there, which I like that because people stop by and look at that. That's a good touch. But a little more social networking, I think, during the tournament would have been good.
We should have somebody live streaming the weigh-ins. That would be nice just to have that, something simple. But there's definitely room for improvement on that. But we're, like I was going to say, we have had the deck has been stacked against us the last couple of years, and we've been trying to fight through it. And there's one thing, I'm just going to announce it now, and who knows how my idea is going to work here. But so I sent in a permit to run a tournament next year on Banks Lake, but to avoid conflicting with any of the other tournaments, you have a limited selection of dates, and it's pretty well packed from March until July. Like, we've got some months with 2 tournaments, or there just isn't a whole lot of space in between. So the dates, when you send a permit in to the state, you can select 3 different dates. And I think for the first selection, I picked the biggest gap that we had in our tournaments for next year is basically the start of July to I think our last tournament is end of July in Boardman next year. So there's a gap in July. And even though people don't like fishing in the heat, that's really our only option as far as that's our first choice. And then I think there were 2 other gaps. One was mid-season, like in May, possibly. I can't remember exactly. And then August was the third option. So we'll see what happens as far as what date we get. And I'll get your guys' feeling on this. And I have nothing set in stone, but what I would like to do is, first off, Friday, Saturday for this event, and no entry fee. And the reason for no entry fee is it would be however you want to term it, captain, co-angler, pro-am, however you want to term it. I haven't really thought about that too much, but if there was no entry fee, I think that's obviously going to bring more people in right now. But it would be similar to the Calcutta, where the guys that want to get financially involved in it can get financially involved in it. So you could not pay a penny to enter this tournament and get your first place trophy, but you're not going to get any cash. So what I'm thinking is no entry fee, fish the tournament, but after the first day, we have a Calcutta, and that will put some money into the pot. And actually, it puts a fair amount of money in the pot typically. And you don't have to be tied to that. You can still fish the tournament, and you could have an opportunity to fish with, I guess, what we would call our pros, like Don or any of the top guys. You could get drawn with them, and it's basically copying the National Walleye Tour. This isn't me suddenly coming up with some great idea, but this is how they run their events. Is the captain will pay a bigger entry fee in that situation, and the co-angler would pay a smaller one. And then the co-angler will fish with a different captain or pro each day. And you share your weight, you're a teammate for the day, and then you move on to a new teammate the next day. I think that would help us get some new blood, because you don't have to be financially involved in it. You're just going fishing, but more so you get to fish with some guys that really know what they're doing. Yeah. And that's the way I'm leaning towards right now, is that type of a format, because we got to try something different to get more people involved. And right now it is so expensive to fish walleye tournaments or any tournaments. I think that the dollar bill is part of that equation. And if we can get that completely out of it, and for the guys that want to gamble and buy their own team or somebody else's team, they can do that. And I'm going to try to get the community, like you say, involved, because we got to get the chamber, all of them involved with something like that. Have some radio announcements and every other, because not everybody does the Facebook thing. I don't think we've done enough radio type announcements or local hardware stores or fishing tackle stores, because I think we've sometimes are relying on Facebook and stuff too much also, where a lot of people don't want to look at that, especially over the last couple of years, So I don't know. I wanted to get your guys' idea if you think that might bring some, or if it's a complete waste of time trying to set something up like that.
No, I don't think it's a waste of time at all. I think it's a good idea. The only thing I see that could be a hurdle is you're going to have, let's say, the captains or the main anglers. They're going to be footing the bill for the boats. Where normally you have a partner that's going to share, hopefully.
Yep.
And so that could be one hurdle. I mean, I certainly don't mind taking my boat out, and I'm going to use it on a weekend anyway. So,
right.
If I got to put gas in, I got to put gas in it. So,
right. And that's where, I would announce, typically in those type of events, when you get drawn with somebody, you want to donate to their fuel bill. I mean, that's just it's common sense, and you shouldn't even have to bring it up, but I guess you do. But yeah, if I'm going out with Don, and we're running all the way across Banks Lake and back, I probably should give him $100 bill for the day's fuel. I mean, that's all kind of common sense. But yeah, typically the co-angler will help with the fuel. And he can bring his own rods and stuff, but you definitely don't want to load up somebody's boat with equipment, because most of the guys are well equipped to handle somebody coming with them, and they don't have the room for more stuff. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
those are all details that I think are easily worked out.
This is a great debate. This it's definitely a problem we're running into if we want to continue the sport on. I don't know that I'm going to, dive deep into this. I know you guys talked about it a little bit on your last podcast with Todd and Mike. One thing I always think about is, we go to these tournaments and there's 40 guys there, 40 teams there, but 36 of those, teams have a partner there whose boat's parked at their house after they get done pre-fishing. I've always thought maybe a couple more, maybe 1 day, 1-man tournaments that are less money in between these main tournaments could be a way to get somebody in the door. Like, I agree with Todd. I think he said in your last podcast that we're not the people you guys are targeting. We're going to be there anyway. Right. The people we need to target are guys that are hesitant to spend $700 to get into these and get their butts kicked.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
tough. It's a tough crew to go against. I mean, you got a lot of guys like yourself. I mean, there's certain guys that you always, when you're watching the weigh-in, and like, oh crap, here we go. Let's see how they did today. So it's a stacked group, but that's why I think having a little bit of a mix up of partners too wouldn't be a horrible idea. Even if it's just a once a year thing where anybody could get drawn to fish with any of the anglers. Like comparing it to the NWT, I mean, it's pretty cool when you get drawn with somebody that you've watched on TV. And trust me, there are fishermen out here just as good as the Midwest. I mean, you're talking to one right there. I mean, I think Ron and Don are the only ones that have won every tournament. Is that correct? Or is it just you, or is it just Ron? I can't remember.
Well, Ron and I actually fished Banks Lake together. We used to fish Moses together for a little while. And then, but Ron is one, don't want to leave him out of something he hasn't won. I don't know that he's won them all. I don't think he's won Moses Lake. And of course, neither one of us have won any tournaments down in Oregon. I won
just
one.
Started, right.
I did win one down there, but it was kind of cheating. I was kind of like,
you were with Chemo.
I was in the boat with Michael Jordan, and I was just kind of like when he'd tell me to drop my worm down to the bottom, I would, so.
That was that rodeo, wasn't it? The 1 year they never did it again. It was that
was our first two fish were like a 15 and a 13 pounder. It was amazing. It was amazing, and we had them in the boat like 20 minutes after we stopped.
Had you and Chemo fished before together, or was that?
Oh yeah, Chemo and I. I've always said I've been lucky. I've had a lot of people that have influenced me and inspired me and stuff, but I've been pretty fortunate to have two guys I call my walleye dads, Chemo and Greg Osborne. Those guys. Chemo's. We know Chemo doesn't need an introduction. He's kind of more a great fisherman. He's smart and he's got a scientific mind. And then Greg Osborne, who lives up here in Kettle Falls now, he used to fish all the tournaments. Him and Chemo were partners. And you talk about two guys that were tough to beat. But Greg has got walleye in his bone marrow. I mean, he thinks like a walleye. So I've been fortunate enough that for years I've been able to network with those guys basically and fish with them and share ideas and it's been pretty cool. There's been a lot of people that, have helped me, but those two guys for sure, pretty cool.
It's a hell of a network.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole circuit has turned into, like you were saying, there's 40, 50 teams that fish these tournaments. They might not make every tournament, but they're all good. They're all good. There used to be 100 teams in a tournament. And some of those guys, quite frankly, didn't have a chance to win, but they were, that's kind of, it dwindled down to the really guys that are really good. I mean, there's some really good fishermen in this circuit. And it seems like when I look back on it, Craig, my partner, Craig Birchers, and I, we started fishing the Governor's Cup the very first year they had it. I think it was 94, and it was so intimidating, a lot of these guys come to town. They had, Lund shirts on and Ranger shirts. And I mean, they look like Brad Pitt smoking cigarettes, they just look so cool. And it was intimidating, but I think my point is there's been, through the decades that we've done this, there's been groups of hot fishermen, there was Caruth and Zinneker and Loper and the Romigs. And then there's, Chemo and Greg Osborne and I don't want to leave anybody out, but then Dave Harrell and Jeb Race and Brad Phillips and all these guys and Jordan Reeder, of course, or the Reeders, but they've all went through these cycles of guys that are really dialed in, and it's easy to, these guys, I think, takes maybe some of our ideas and they make them better. And then pretty soon, we may have inspired them, but then pretty soon we're wondering what in the hell are those guys doing? I mean, there's a lot of good fishermen, a lot of good minds out there. So,
oh yeah, there's
anytime you win a tournament, I think, you did something.
And there's guys that have evolved too, like went from guys that you always seen at the bottom to a couple years later. And I'm not going to name their names because I don't want to make them feel, even though they're doing good now, but there are a few teams that you never worried about. Now it's like, oh shit, these guys can win. You look at the last few years and they've figured out how to fish. And I think that's the biggest thing about this group, the tournaments, is if you want to get better, you probably aren't right away, but you learn from the guys like Don and there's a ton of guys that you can learn from, and they all fish differently. You just got to take that and change the way you fish, because it's walleye fishing has definitely changed from what I've seen over the last 10 years, coming from the Midwest, especially not being able to use live bait out here. And I was frustrated at first because when I first moved out here, you could use leeches. And then a year or two later, that was over. And I was frustrated, man. I was like, this is ridiculous. I used to love going slip bobbing with leeches. But once we couldn't use live bait anymore, I became better at fishing.
Made you a better fisherman.
Walleye. Absolutely. Yeah. No question about it. And that's why guys like Jeb and Brian, all those guys that are super power fishermen, those are the guys I'm always worried about, because if they get on the bite they're looking for, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That was one of the things that I'd written down, that also the evolution of the, since I've been doing this, the baits, that was started out, a lot of people, were of course pulling spinners, and a lot of people still do. And there's a time for that, but it was spinners, and then it was rigging leeches. And I remember that was when we actually started doing pretty well in the tournaments. Ron Charlton was really, really good at rigging leeches. He could catch a walleye in a mud puddle on a leech, And I remember we were at a tournament in Moses Lake, and we were literally, I can't say we were the first person to pull leeches, but we kind of figured it out, maybe a little ahead of the curve or something, and give Ron credit for that. But we were just wailing on them, and the Romigs were over there, and that, to us, they were kind of like somebody we really looked up to. And I remember Stan Romig slapped his fishing pole on the water and said, "The heavy hen's got another one, God damn it." That was cool for us, to get in their head a little bit, But,
What did they say? The heavy hand has got another
yeah,
one?
my boat used to be called the Heavy Hand. I had this old Hughescraft, and it had Heavy Hand on the back of it.
Oh, really?
It said, "Their goddamn Heavy Hand's got another one."
Oh, that's
Yeah.
hilarious.
But my point to this story was we did pretty good for a couple of years, and a lot of it was rigging leeches. And when they made it so that you couldn't bring leeches into the state, I remember Dave Zinneker, who was he was a wild man. I mean, he
Oh,
was a
yeah.
wild man. But I don't
Yeah.
know if I was his. I don't know if I was his favorite person for some reason. I don't know why, but I remember he pulled right up to me and he said, "What are you gonna do now that you can't use leeches?" He was screaming at me. He was so happy. And it was the very next tournament. Ron and I got second place at Banks Lake, and we pulled gope worms the entire time. So we kind of embraced that. And I know a lot of these guys, that you mentioned, the Mike Cooks and Todd Pretties and Jeb and all those. I don't have to name them all, but I know these guys, aren't necessarily. They're fishing like they're bass fishing, and they're innovative, and they're
Yep.
good. They're good, So
that brings up a good point too, because you do see the evolution of how people are fishing, and this comes to mind because it was going on up there at Kettle Falls this year. You see people that are not just trolling and they're not just casting; they're doing both.
Yeah.
They've got boards out to one side and somebody's up front casting. So you've got that combination. I mean, you're able to maybe even pinpoint, okay, these fish are really tight to the bank. So, the guy that's casting, he's catching the fish. Okay, let's abandon that. We can go to this, or vice versa, and it's a combination of that where, a lot of people that kind of figure this out can say, okay, well, we can do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Kettle Falls is actually a pretty you have to be diverse to be good there. I really think you do. You got to be able to do a little everything. When the conditions aren't good. This year it seemed like the conditions were for what we were doing was pretty good in practice for the most part. It wasn't quite as easy during the 2 tournament days as it was in practice for us. In practice, we caught quite a few nice fish, and a lot of them. But I think you got to be able to change things up a little bit and not be afraid to, move out, move in, drop a worm down, cast a jig. You got to do a lot of things. My take on it,
Yeah.
anyway.
No,
Especially,
You're right. I mean, I was on a way better pre-fish than tournament results for myself, and probably completely my fault. I think they were still in the same area, just a little bit. It was similar to a couple of years ago where we did good on day 1, and about halfway through day 2, we finally the light came on, and Dan and I we found them suspended off of the break line. And this year, I was probably way too stubborn. But man, it is also hard to change tactics when you're having a good time. And Aaron Wheats and I fished together, and we were having a blast. And we were catching them on swim baits. We caught them on every tactic. We just couldn't find anything over 20 inches. Like, I think 19 and a half was probably our biggest fish in the whole 2 days. Whereas pre-fish, we had nicer fish, but we had a blast, man. We probably caught 200 fish in 2 days. And we kind of knew it was unlikely to find the right fish, but we kind of just bowed our heads and said, let's just have fun. And we did, because we were kind of out of it after the first day, we felt. So we just had fun. And typically in these tournaments, if you are catching a ton of fish and not the right fish, it is hard to get away from that. But I'm sure Don didn't catch nearly as many fish as we did. He probably was on my least favorite term, grind bite.
yeah.
But I'm assuming that's what he was on, where he had multiple spots where he was checking them, bouncing around back and forth, and finally caught a nice fish here, a nice fish there.
Yeah.
You typically don't sift through hundreds of fish and win a tournament.
Yeah, probably
typically.
not. I mean, I'm supposed somebody has,
Right.
it was, kind of one of the things I'll say is, Craig and I have we've been fishing this tournament for a long time, and he does things that, he's a good fisherman. He doesn't fish all the other tournaments and stuff. And one of the things that's kind of cool about that is when we get in the boat together at Governor's Cup time, he'll pull something out of his tackle box that I would never fish it, or he throws a jig and jigs it a different way than, that we did at Banks Lake or we did at Moses Lake, or, and oftentimes, that pans out, something different than sometimes it don't, but
Right.
one of the things that we kind of learned during this tournament was, what we didn't go out fishing on Wednesday until afternoon, and we did pretty well. And then on Thursday, we didn't go out until afternoon, and we did pretty well. And Friday morning, we went out in the morning, and we had some boat problems, so we ended up coming back kind of early, and we did not do very well. And I think, and during the tournament, basically, it was easier not to get spun out because we didn't usually do well in the mornings, and we didn't really in the tournament either. It was kind of a late deal for us every day, and it was hard. It was hard to just keep doing what we were doing,
Right.
and not really catch fish. We caught 9 fish on Saturday, and I think we caught 11 on Sunday, 11 or 12
Right.
Sunday.
So,
And it was hard. I mean, it was like,
Yeah, but it was the right fish. So
yeah, they were really nice fish. And I think probably the other thing that was kind of a key, we stayed patient. And I think that's what the thing I give us the credit the most for, because we got to, to win one of these, you got to get a little bit lucky, and I think our luck part is we just stayed with the program and we kept moving. But one of the things is that we had all these nice fish that we caught during practice, and not one of those spots did we catch a significant fish in. Saturday and Sunday, we didn't catch a fish in any of those spots we fished. Saturday.
wow.
We got a little bit lucky.
You had to earn it then. Yeah.
We landed. We just kept moving and landed on the right couple of fish,
Yep.
So what were you looking for down there? I mean, obviously you don't have to give a GPS point, but
no, we basically started both days very local, could see the marina, from where we started both days. And we were kind of hoping for a morning bite there. It didn't materialize as much as we wanted, a couple of small fish. But then we just kept moving, and we were looking for dirty water. Of course, there was so much current. You could say that you were looking for current, but there was a lot of current, and really, Lonnie, that, I can't really say that we were looking for anything like specific, like any kind of structure or anything like that. We were covering ground. We were mostly pulling crankbaits, and I was one of those guys up in the bow. I do that a lot. I was up in the bow casting a jig, and fortunate enough to get a couple doing that were key fish as well.
Well, did you notice that they were either on a tight break? Were they on a point?
We had so many spots that I'm, probably 30 spots that we fished a day. Some of them were a little different. I would have to say, if anything, it was maybe water clarity that we were looking for.
The dirtier, the better?
The dirtier, the better for us. Which it really changed. The water clarity really changed that's the problem with Lake Roosevelt. The water really changed between Thursday or Wednesday and Saturday. I thought it cleared up a lot, where in the spots that we were fishing anyway. So,
Well, I just noticed that, and like I said, we didn't do great either. We were mid-pack, but the bigger fish that we were able to catch, they seemed to be tight to the bank on a steep break,
Mm-hmm.
and it was pulling a crank, same thing. And, we tried to duplicate that, but I just don't have enough experience up there to say, okay,
Yeah.
here, or there. So we had a few spots that we were hitting. But that was one thing I noticed was, our inside board that was closest to the tight bank was the one that was hitting.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, we had actually filleted a few fish on Wednesday and Thursday, and some eater size or whatever, and all those fish which we caught in the same spots, same depths and stuff, but those fish were all full of crawdads. I didn't fillet one fish that had a trout in it or nothing. It was all crawdads. So that's probably why you said the steep banks, probably around some rock or something, or I don't know. My aunt and uncle got a cabin down here. We'll be standing in the water, and it's just a sandy beach, and a crawdad will just come out of nowhere, and I don't know what they're doing, but getting away from a predator or something. But I don't know that they're always in the rocks, I guess is what I'm saying, the crawdads,
Yeah, well, one thing I was going to point out, and I hope it's okay to say, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to care, but the one thing that we noticed too was it was that tight bank, but it was where you'd have your rip wrap rock and it transitioned to sand or clay.
Sure. Yeah.
And it seemed like that board, I mean, we'd go across it and boom, the board would go down. It's like, okay. And I guess we were too stubborn to turn around and just cast the stupid thing, but we figured by covering more water, we might have more of an opportunity. So,
yeah, I tell you what, this tournament was pretty impressive, well, we knew we had a pretty good bag on Saturday, and then come in and the frickin' McKerns got 25 pounds, and those guys can catch them, and I know Brett and I fish potholes together every year, and we fish out here a lot together. So, I didn't know what he was doing. It's not like we talked about it or anything, but I had an idea he was probably doing the same thing I was doing. Ken House is another guy. You just never know. Him and Phil Adams, when they pull, you don't know what they're going to have. And I couldn't believe it. We had 21 pounds. We come in there, we're in third place. What do we got to do?
Yeah, I think I'd only seen 20 pounds once before ever, and there were 3 over 20 this year.
Yeah,
on day one.
Yeah, and kind of like what you were saying, you on this body of water, it can be done.
Right.
There's some giants out there. I mean, but that was pretty cool.
You were the only one that figured them out on day 2. I think you had the best one, right? Bag on day 2.
Yeah, we had the biggest bag. Yeah, it was a
17 and a half or 18.
17-pound bag. It was just short of 17.
You probably didn't think you had it won then coming in.
No, I didn't really. I thought we kept thinking that we had 3 decent fish in there. And we kept thinking that we really needed one more decent fish, maybe to get back to 20 pounds. Thought that might do it. And we did actually, we did actually cull. We got back to Kettle Falls with 20 minutes left, and we had 4 decent fish, but we had 2 really little ones. And we got back to Kettle Falls with 20 minutes left and started pitching a jig around. We caught 3 fish in 20 minutes and got rid of both of those little fish.
Nice.
And, you think about the big fish you caught, but probably those 2 18 inches that we caught with 20 minutes to go, probably.
Yeah, you didn't win by much, did you? What was the?
No, it was a pound. I think it was a pound.
Right.
Yeah,
it probably did make a difference, and that's
probably did. It would have been really close, I think, if not.
Yeah. And that's one
tournament. Never give up.
I got a funny story for you years ago, man. So Terry, the first time I ever won a tournament, Terry Connolly, and I didn't know a lot of the guys back then. This was 2015, and we actually weighed in like an hour and a half early that year. It was 115 degrees out that day. So we had to watch everybody come in, and I loosely knew who people were, but this was like my second year of kind of fishing these. And Brian and Jeb, so we had to finish by the marina, and we saw them fishing, and I did know who they were, and all of a sudden I heard them screaming and high-fiving, and I'm like, and at the time, you possibly did, because there were a lot of boats. This was over in the Colville, and we had to finish there because we had no batteries, and we heard them screaming and hollering, and we're like, shit, because we were thinking, man, we probably got top 3. We didn't think we'd won it, but we came in and weighed in, and so then we had to wait and watch everybody. And like I say, I know they didn't know who I was back then. I knew Brian and Jeb's name, and they came up with a nice bag on day 2, which was like 16, 17 pounds, if I remember right. And like I say, we'd already weighed in, and we got a 31 or 32 incher that day, just completely won us the tournament, one fish. And I will take it, got it. I don't care if it was lucky, whatever.
Yeah.
It won the tournament. So, but Brian and Jeb came up, and they thought they had won it. And I've never talked to them about this, but we heard the way they were celebrating, they thought they'd won it. And back then, George Allen was writing the weights and stuff, and he'd wrote down Halverson Connolly 10 point, whatever it was. And it was Brian, when he was carrying his bag, he looked up there, and the look on his face. I mean, they won it like 2 times after that in the next couple of years. So I didn't feel bad for them,
Yeah.
But the look on his face was like, are you kidding me? Who the hell are these idiots? Well, it was us. And that is one tournament, though. You can literally run into one fish, and you kind of need one of those each day to win that tournament. We never had like Don's bag. He probably had a bunch of nice 22s, 23s, I'm assuming. We just literally ran into one fish that won us the tournament.
There's been a couple years that's happened. Yeah.
Yep. Darren Green won it one year on one fish.
I think for a couple of reasons. One, the tribe's been out there gill netting for about 5 years now, and they're I'm sure they're killing more walleye than they're reporting, but the fish are a little bit nicer, right? I mean, right now, I'm sure it's going to cycle. Maybe it'll cycle. The fish are a little bit nicer, a little harder to catch, maybe, but there's so much. That's another thing about Lake Roosevelt is there's so much water, so much shoreline. There's this tournament has been won, from Canada to the mouth of the Spokane River. There's just so much water. You can go find your own fish somewhere.
That's what my partner and I were talking about. It can be intimidating for somebody that's not really spent a lot of time, because there is you start looking at maps and you start looking at this and you're going, man, there is so much water to cover. And, where do you start?
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of the.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think the other hard thing about the Governor's Cup, especially late in June, is the fact that you don't know what stage the water's in. There's been years when there's been weeds up and the water's kind of full pool. And there's been years like this year when it was still flowing, a lot of flow. And it's been cold, and we know what the spring's been like. And I don't think, unless somebody else found them, I don't think weeds came into play at all for guys. There was ground weeds, but there was really no cabbage, that were holding a flat with a bunch of cabbage. It was holding big fish or anything. So I think, moving around was kind of key. I think the fish were still traveling, getting to wherever they're going,
Sure.
So I don't know if you guys have heard, but the board did vote the other night. The Governor's Cup next year will be July 8th and 9th. They pushed it back a week.
Really?
Yes. Basically kind of in cooperation with Columbia River Walleye Circuit. It's going to, I'm not the authority to speak for this, but kind of to space the tournaments out, give 3 weeks apart between all the tournaments, supposedly. But
Well, that would have been good. That would have been good to know before I sent the permit in, because that was not.
yeah,
I
I was
was
wondering
not
about
told
that
that.
when you just said that. I was just
Yeah. Well, I literally asked right before the kettle tournament for the schedule, and that must have
it was
happened
after.
after that.
It was
Yeah.
after.
But we'll deal with it.
Yeah.
I'll get a hold of the permit guy and just ixnay, because I think the second week in July was my first choice. So I'll just have to
I was wondering
get
when
rid
you
of.
said that, but
Did they add a tournament to into June or something? And I'll have to ask
I don't-
Jordan about that.
you asked Jordan. Jordan was on the line, kind of. I think it was their request, and the Walleye Club got together. I actually went to the meeting, and we talked about it. And this is the oldest tournament, to my knowledge. It's
Right.
been going on for 28 years, so it wasn't a decision taken lightly. To move the date.
Right.
But there's a lot of upside to it. The fishing could still be just fantastic. I think it'll be different, a little bit different. I think there could be some weeds come into play, which is, there's a few guys that are dangerous when that happens. Some
Yeah.
weeds come into play. There could definitely be a suspended bite that comes into play, I would say. Yeah, it's gonna be the same thing. You could make it happen in a wide stretch of the river. Give the fish a couple more weeks to fatten up a little bit, so it could be some good weights. So we'll
you
see.
think this is a good thing?
I do. I'm without getting into the whole how are we going to increase the participation. That was part of the mind thought that with 3 weeks in between these tournaments, some more of the guys from down south would be able to get up here. We'll see. I think one of the guys, brought up the point that it's the week after the 4th of July. Possibly people will vacation here and then fish the tournament. So it'll be good for the town.
Sure.
Regardless of when that tournament is, it's never the same conditions
No, that's
Doesn't
kind
from
of
what
like
I've
it.
seen.
that was kind of my point. When I say you could take the pattern that like we use this year, and it might be major,
Yeah.
major failure next year, because it just, things change within days that time of the year. Within days, water clears up, it comes up, the flow slows down, a north wind blows. You just don't know, and all those things come into play on a body of water that's got pretty clear water typically.
Yeah.
Right. Well, don't you think though at that point in time, because generally they want to have it as full as they're going to put it by the 1st of July. So
Right.
wouldn't that be stable water conditions as far as flow goes? You're not going to have an increase or decrease at that point in time.
Yeah, it'll still be flowing. There's always flow. It doesn't lose flow till quite a bit later in the year. It's harder to detect when the water gets full pool, but there's still flow.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we always look forward to coming up to it. We've really only been hitting it for maybe the last 5 years, pretty heavy. And, we learn something new every time we're up there.
Yeah. Yeah. So do I, actually. There's, like I said, Craig and I have fished this body of water for a long time, and about the time you think you got it figured out, and somebody's doing something else that you weren't doing, you know how it goes.
Oh yeah. But the weights, especially this year, it always seemed like in the past, if you could get to that 2-day total of about 25 to 27 pounds,
You cash a check, yeah.
you'd be okay. And that's why this year you see 21, 23 at 25, and you're going, holy cow, for day one.
Yeah.
We didn't have a horseshoe on right that day, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it could have happened to you just as easy as it happened to us. It just right place, the right time,
Sure. Well, and I know that I didn't know who they were, but the McKerns, I mean, we were fishing pretty much right next to them. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
And then, they pulled in day 2, and Chad and I were talking about it after the first day. And I still didn't really quite connect it because he had mentioned something about it being a Lund, but they were out of a Larson.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I kind of felt bad because I didn't know that's who they were. And, we were kind of passing them. And I was like, oh, crap, I wonder if that's. So we kind of left them alone a little bit and tried to stay out of their way. But, they would leave. And then about 30 minutes, they'd come back, fish the area. And then they'd leave. And about an hour, they'd come back. So,
kind of have, well, what are those guys doing over there?
well,
I ran into one of the top, Rick Sutherland. I don't remember did he get third or Rick was in the top.
I think he got fourth. He got fourth. Ken House got third.
Yeah, Ken and Phil got. Yeah. I ran into Rick. So on day 2, we kind of got tired of catching our small fish, and we ran half an hour, and I figured I would run into somebody, and I told Aaron, I said, there's probably going to be somebody up here because this is going to be out of the current. And sure, Rick was up there and one other guy, I think it was Dennis Morgan, I believe. So, and we saw what they were doing and we just gave them their space.
Yeah.
And we still had a heck of a time. But when you see somebody like that that's in the mix, it's I know it's tough for some guys, but you want to try to give them their
like what you said, Lonnie, you didn't know who they were. You don't know, and not everybody knows everybody. I'm not good at it. I mean, it looks to me like everybody's got a black 20-foot Ranger to me. Now,
I get shit from Dan all the time. Whenever I see a red boat, I said, shit, here comes Donnie, and it's not Donnie. And he's like, oh, so whenever he sees a red boat, he's like, oh, there's Donnie. And it could be like a Hughes craft. Yeah. And you're like, oh, there's Don. I'm like, fuck you, man. That's the way Dan is. I'm bad too at recognizing boats.
I think the thing of it is once you recognize the situation and you do the right thing, that's but we don't all know. I mean, not everybody knows who they are. And especially, if you're, I don't know, it's a touchy subject. I
got a funny story. I got a funny story for Don. He's probably never heard this. I think I've mentioned this before, but years ago on Banks Lake, Terry Connolly and I were fishing. I think it was like one of the first times I ever fished it in 14. And I knew who Don and Ron were. And Terry and I were at Rosebush and there was nobody else there. And all of a sudden Ron and Don come and they were fairly close to us. And we were kind of circling around some rocks and catching fish. And so they pull up and I'm like, oh, great. And they didn't say a word. I don't know if he remembers this. Probably doesn't. They never said a word. And we weren't like right next to each other, but we were definitely within, I could speak in normal voice and say, hi, how you doing? But it was dead silence and probably for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And I don't know if it was Ron or Don, but all of a sudden they put their bow mount up and they were fairly close to us. And they said, one of them said, well, good talking to you boys. And it was the funniest shit. We both just basically fell over laughing because nobody said a word to each other. I don't know if you remember that. You probably don't.
I don't.
I'll always remember that because you got 2 tournament guys and we thought we had a place to ourselves and somebody pulls in. You're generally not talkative is what my point is. So nobody said a word to each other. And then those guys just kind of broke the ice by saying, well, good talking to you. And they took off. And
I can't imagine if I was fishing Banks Lake, I was with Ron. I can't imagine him not talking.
Yeah, exactly. It was probably Ron. But
one year at Banks Lake, Ron and I were fishing. It was early on in our tournament career, and we were doing good. Every boat you go by, Ron's like, hey, Jim, how you doing? How's your wife, Carol? Are your kids still in school? He knows everybody, every scenario, And I mean, I can't. I'm like Mr. Magoo. I can't even see if it's a black boat or a blue boat. And anyway, Ron's telling some people I feel like a little bit too much information, no reason that they need to know we have a limit,
Right,
so,
right.
Anyway, I told him, this guy was coming up, trolling up to us. And I told Ron, I said, Ron, I said, keep your mouth shut. You don't need to tell this guy that we got 6 fish, you know. I said, he'll stay here all day. And Ron goes, all right. And we just brush right up by the guy, and the guy looks right at me and he says, how many fish you got? And I said, 6. And Ron goes, no, we weren't telling anybody that. You know, usually he was, yeah, I just take it when the guy looked right at me, how many fish you got? You know, I go, we got 6. You know, the cool thing about this whole thing is, God, look at the relationships that, you know, we've made in this whole thing. You know, a lot of great guys and too many great fishermen to name. You know, you mentioned Rick Southern a little bit ago. There's a guy that is, you know, I don't know how him and Tom do it, but they can fish all day long, and they come in and you go look in their boat and there's not even a night crawler box in there. I mean, there's nothing in there, but you know, I mean, I have no idea what those guys do. And I've been fishing with those guys for 20 years. I don't, you know, who could say? I know they're diverse and I know they're good fishermen, but they're just very secretive guys, you know, and some guys are like that. Some guys tell all. You never know. So,
Yeah.
But
I think once you have some success, it's a little bit easier to talk to. I mean, I know that's my case. I mean, I was now I'm at the point where I really don't care. You know, I'll talk about how I was fishing for those fish, because you do realize over the years that it's probably going to change every year. And to be honest with you, you know, if we're going to be so tight-lipped, we're never going to get more people involved. You know, I want to see guys that have never win a tournament in our group. I mean, I actually, you know, because I remember failing many times and then finally won one, and it was such a great feeling. So it's cool when you see guys that have never won a tournament, and it's tough, man. You got guys to go against that are really good.
It is. Yeah, it's like
and it's a 2-day tournament. You know?
You said something the other day. I watched a couple of the podcasts where I prepared for this day a little bit. So, but you said something. I think it was you and Mike and Todd. Lon, you guys were all talking about you know, shrinking the boundaries down, you know, letting the guys with a 50 horse have a half-hour head start, blah, blah, blah. But you said something that was my mentality. I kept fishing tournaments because those guys were beating me.
Right.
Not because I had a crummy boat.
Yeah.
I kept fishing because I was why? I wanted to know why.
You were the underdog. It's way more fun being the underdog.
Why? What are they doing? And so I kept fishing. You know, I started out with the Governor's Cup, then I started going to Banks Lake, and then Potholes and Moses, and then, you know.
You don't have to have $150,000 boat to win. I mean, when my dad and I first started out, we were in a 15.5-foot fiber form with a 70 horse Johnson. You know, we had a makeshift platform on the front to be able to stand in it because it was an open bow. And, you know, we did fairly well. You know, it wasn't until several years later that he ended up buying a smoker craft. And, you know, we thought we were the cat's meow. It didn't help us any. I think we caught more fish in the fiber form. But
yeah, everything's a tool. You know, I mean, we haven't even talked about all these electronics and everything. You know, I'm behind the curve on that. You know,
I hope you never figure any of that stuff out. You just stay right away from that stuff.
I actually in this tournament here, my partner Craig, he hasn't had a boat for quite a few years, you know. So he actually just bought a boat a few weeks before the tournament, and he's like, what do I need? You know, he's a funny guy, you know. What do I need for this? Well, he just gets online and orders up, you know, a live 12, a 9 for the front, an active target. He's never even turned one of these on, you know.
Right.
And it all comes in the mail about 2 days before the tournament. He said, well, let's just put this stuff on your boat, you know, for the tournament. I think, you know, it's quite a bit of, you know, quite a bit of installation stuff going on. And you'd think we kind of, you know, spend our time out on the water maybe, but no, we stayed up at the shop for about 5 hours one night drilling, you know.
Oh yeah.
This active target stuff on there. And Friday we came in early and I took it all off and went back to the stuff that I got because
Really?
it was just overwhelming.
Yeah,
You know?
it is for a lot of people at 1st.
Mhm.
And I'll say this. This is the best way for me to describe forward facing sonars. Guys like Don don't need it. They've already learned through the years how these walleyes, for the most part, I mean, I'm sure he's had bad days too, but they've already went through it the hard way. But you can really accelerate your skills with that type of equipment. Like in the Midwest, Tom Wynn, he's a bass fisherman. He fishes totally different than most walleye guys. The guy pretty much places or wins every tournament the guy is entering. And he's not a walleye guy. I mean, he's been fishing walleyes for a few years now, but he actually, we should be beating this guy, but he is stomping mud holes and all into all the walleye guys because of forward facing, and he's learned how to fish with it. But I think that there are a lot of guys that have already achieved that level and they don't want to use that type of technology because they already know how those fish are reacting, or they think they do, and they're probably right. But the biggest thing about that type of technology is you will learn how the fish reacts. And I think those guys with the experience, they already kind of know if they start out with an aggressive bait, maybe they need to tone it down a little bit. They've already went through the grind of figuring it out the hard way. And but if you want to learn quickly and you really focus, we could have some guy from some 18-year-old from high school could enter our circuit and crush all of us if he's good enough with that type of technology.
Yeah,
and I know. Luckily, we don't have a lot of those guys.
Yeah, I know a couple of guys that, I mean, again, I don't want to leave anybody out. I know like Todd Pretty, he is good with that stuff. He's a good pre-fisherman because of that. I don't think he spends. I mean, I fish a tournament with Todd. We fished Moses Lake together the last 3 years, and he doesn't. I'm the kind of guy that pre-fishing. I think like I go out and fish, and I caught him on a red. I caught him on this. Todd goes out and looks around, and and when the tournament starts on Saturday, he's in generally the right spot. Yep. Not this year on Moses Lake, but no, we were actually in the right spot. We just didn't catch him, I mean, but he's good at that. And Mike, all those guys, Mike Cook, and I'm sure there's a lot of guys. Obviously, the readers are good at that as well. Yourself and
there's different ways to use it too. I mean, a lot of people seem to be confused, like that you need to point your forward facing at that fish and cast at them. While that is a tactic that some guys do, it is absolutely not how you need to use that thing. You're going to understand the fish reaction to your cast. You're going to understand the fish reaction to the bait that they might be chasing. You're going to understand the bait's reaction to how you're putting your lure into them. So I know a couple guys that have got live scope and I can't fish this way, and they immediately sell it. And that's just because they're used to fishing the way that they've always fished. But I can say that I've had some success in tournaments pulling crankbaits with live scope. No doubt. I mean, and you can three-way rig with live scope. You can watch your crankbaits. I mean, there's a lot of things that people don't realize. And once they do, a light switch might come on. Like when you can literally look down at your crankbait 30, 40 feet behind your boat and see a giant fish swimming after it and give it a little twitch and watch that fish hit. How can you say that didn't help you catch that fish? I mean, so you definitely have to put the time in with forward facing or rear facing, however you want to describe it. Yeah. It's not a magic wand that you just turn on.
Yeah. I don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but at Banks Lake, the top 5 guys, the first 4 had some sort of forward-facing sonar. Coincidence or not, but I know the first 4 places, 1 through 4, all those guys, I know those guys, and they all had forward-facing sonar.
Well,
Yep.
here's the thing too. You mentioned that about forward facing, rear facing, side facing. The beautiful thing about it is you can take it and move it where you want to be able
Yeah.
to look.
Yeah.
And that's, speaking of what you were just talking about with your crankbait, I did that yesterday when I was pulling spinners.
Oh yeah, tell us your story.
So, I've got it so I can move it from the front to the back. And, I'm pulling my spinners and I can point it to where I can see what it's doing. Because, a lot of the areas you might be in, yeah, you can see it on your down, but when you see it live, you can see every little rock, you can see every little bush. And as I'm coming through it, I see that it's coming up on, it looked to me like a boulder. So I didn't want to get stuck. So I start reeling it up and I can see it coming up. And right behind it comes this big old freaking blob. And I'm like, holy crap. So I just kind of started to move it forward and just paused it and let it back. And that thing hit it, set the hook. And I was like, holy crap, dude, this is either one hell of a big carp or it's a nice walleye. And it just started peeling line, going straight down. I'm like, okay, that ain't a carp. Fought it, got it up there, netted it in. And I was like, this is going to be my biggest walleye ever. Put it on the boards, 32 inches, 13 and a half pounds. Nice. And that came out of Banks.
Wow.
I was like.
And you watched it bite.
I watched it bite.
Wow.
But, here's the thing is I might not have even had a chance at that thing. Not saying it would have happened, but had I not seen that boulder, started to reel up, who knows, that fish could have been sitting on the side of it. Yeah. And as it comes up, I can see what it's doing. It's just kind of right behind it. And as soon as I sped it up, you could see it start to speed up, and I dropped it right into its mouth.
Yep. It reacted to your movement. No, take all the credit for it. I do believe you would either snagged into that rock or whatever, but it reacted to your movement of going around that rock. And so there's a lot of things that people don't realize that a lot of guys are using that type of technology for. It's not just looking at a fish. It's looking at bait fish. But it's obviously a luxury item. You definitely don't need it, but if you can afford to get that type of stuff, and now's the time to get it because the price is actually coming down because everybody's coming out with their new improved versions and selling the old ones, which work just fine.
You got to spend the time to learn how to use it as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. You have to spend a lot of time.
I hate to make myself look like an idiot on a podcast, but
we do it all the time, so don't worry about it.
We spent about 5 hours installing all this. Most of it was installing, getting it hooked up to power, and finally I get the active target on there, and we finish up for the night. We might have had a couple beers while we were doing it too. I'm sure we did. Finish up for the night. I go to work the next morning. We get out on the water, and we put this thing down. We cannot get this thing to work. It's driving me nuts. I mess with it for a bit, and then we go. Well, finally towards the end of the night, we had to look over the bow of the boat and had the active target was about 3 inches above the water. And I was kind of, like, hey, geez, I wonder why we couldn't see any fish. I seen a guy go by in a Magoo a little bit ago, and there's a guy, swimming over there at Haig's Cove, but we didn't see any fish, So we finally lowered it in the water, and it did help. But
Yep. It takes some time. But it's not needed for everybody, like I say, but don't question it. Like, it will make you better, but it's almost like you need to have a younger generation angler with you sometimes to help with all the settings, and you really got to put time. You got to go to school and watch some videos. There's a lot of guys that do some good videos on how to, whatever brand you're using. And honestly, there's a lot of guys that are actually, as part of their guide fee, are training people on how to use that stuff. And a lot of people are laughing, like, why would I pay for? Well, trust me, there's a reason, because those guys have spent a lot of hours dialing those. I'm not even good with it, and I use the heck out of it. But the settings, it's always variable. Every body of water, you have to tinker with it to get it tuned into how you want to fish it. So it is definitely not a just turn the thing on and use it type of a sonar.
It's definitely something that I would like to have. I think, I'm going to maybe back off on it a little bit here. I don't think I need it this year, maybe next year, this winter. It'll be something maybe purchase and mess around with.
I don't think you should get it, period. Actually, I think you're doing you should probably back off on all technologies.
Yeah.
We're going to put you back in the paper graph.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, we had the dates change this year, which I was all for. You know, I mean, some of them didn't work out, you know, a little bit, but if you think about it, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, you know, and with the same partners for most of the time, you know, and you take 25 years of experience at a certain week per year, going to potholes or Moses or Banks or Governor's Cup. And you kind of threw 25 years of experience out the window, really, by changing the dates, which that's okay. I was okay with that, you know, but it's not like I kicked anybody's butt, you know, doing it. I mean, we struggled in the first couple tournaments just because the fish weren't where we normally caught them, you know.
Yep.
So that was kind of cool, you know. Sometimes it's just your day and sometimes it's not, you know. Sometimes it's not your year, you know.
Oh yeah. Yep.
But
I'm
it's
still
all,
waiting for that to happen, Don.
it'll happen. It'll happen. We were talking about this the other night, and I don't think I might have cashed a check, or two, but I never won a tournament for 12 years until I started doing this. And then it kind of, you know, got on a little bit of a hot streak and you know, seemed like for a while, you know, I didn't even know what I was doing or whatever, but it was working or whatever. And we just kind of had it going on in those bodies of water, you know, but then somebody else, like we were saying, so it's somebody, Dave Harrell comes in. What is Dave Harrell doing? I don't think is he looking at forward facing sonar?
No.
He's just a fisherman. He can catch fish in anywhere he goes, you know.
Yep.
I don't know that Dave's not using that, but he's just I think he's probably the guy that goes out and figures it out with
No, I don't think Dave's using it. No, I think he's really tuned in on especially those bodies of water and kettle too. I mean, him and Sam always did good. Neither of them came this year, but you know, they're just really good fishermen.
And I don't know if Chemo has updated. At the last time I talked to him, he hadn't. You know, he's just relying a lot on his knowledge and his experience, and he's a really everybody should get to fish a tournament with Chemo because he's so level-headed and he thinks and calm. He's always calm, you know. But I know a little bit this year. He was a little bit frustrated with the technology that guys were able to just, like you said, step in with only a few years in this circuit and just like, oh, there's a fish over there. There's one, and catch it, you know.
Yep.
You know, he was a little frustrated with that. You know, I'm sure he'll work it out and nobody probably feels sorry for him, you know.
No, because he's, you know, like there are certain guys, and you're one of them, that you always want to, like, oh, we got to beat Chemo. We got to beat Don if we're going to do any good. And Chemo I never expected to do good up there. And we lucked out because it was a slot tournament. We never would have won that tournament, but for us, we benefited because of the slot. But there is no question that you got to beat, there's I don't know, 6-7 teams up or down in Umatilla that are just, everything's got to go right to beat those guys. But everywhere we go, whether it's kettle or way over there, you got that core group of guys that you have to beat. But like Don was saying earlier, you can't let that be the bottom line. You have to, and I think most of us have that competitive drive to say, I'm just as good as they are. I'm not better, but I can beat them. And, you know, there were a few guys that we never thought we could win a tournament against Chemo and those guys. Like, that's going to be tough. Everything's got to go right and wrong for them to win those types of tournaments. But it can happen.
I can guarantee you the guys that are winning consistently are spending a lot of time on the water.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing.
They're spending time on the water. They're earning, you know, their dominance usually.
Yep. And they're not beating up on their fish too. They're
Right.
doing a lot like you were saying with Todd. Like some of our best tournaments have been when I have the willpower to not fish and drag a camera around if I'm not comfortable with my electronics telling me what's what. But we've done good in tournaments where I just drug a camera around, found the fish, marked them, and then fished for them. It's worked big for us. So that's another thing that people don't realize. When we usually have horrible pre-fishes because we don't want to target them. And it can get frustrating being out there for 10, 12 hours and catching one or two fish. I'm sure you've ran into this, but you're trying to figure out something to win the tournament, not finish mid-pack like, typically
a lot of times pre-fishing's figuring out what you're not going to do, not what you're going to do.
Exactly. Trying to find new spots that, hey, there are fish here.
Eliminate what you're not going to do,
Yeah, but you go back to what you just said about time on the water. I don't care how many YouTube videos you watch or what you're going to do. You've got to spend that time on the water to be able to understand what you're doing, what you're seeing. You can't take somebody out there and just say, okay, here's a spinning rod and a jig, cast it over there and see how it's. You got to know how to do that. You got to learn how to do that. You got to understand what you're feeling. Whether you're feeling a bottom, a weed, a bite. What the difference is.
We used to like on, I fished with Brett a lot. I always tease Brett. Brett's quite a bit younger than me, but I always say I raised him on beer, bologna, and Tabasco sauce. He used to always get in the boat with me, and we would literally troll crankbaits for hours down the bank and never turn around. And when I look back on that, some of those spots where we caught fish and made a waypoint, they're good jigging spots now, or they're, there was a reason those fish were there. They weren't just,
Right.
It wasn't just totally random. And I think it was all those hours and hours and hours of just covering ground out there. That's how, we found a lot of our spots and a lot of our knowledge. It was, I call it the pre-golf dawn. Before I started golfing, that's what I did, so.
Yeah, we should never have a walleye / golf tournament because I heard that Don's a scratch golfer, and that's
not quite scratch, but
he could help us out by just spending more time on the golf.
Yeah,
of course, less time on the water.
Yeah,
give us a chance.
Yeah.
All right, Don. Well, I appreciate you joining us. It was good. I had a good time.
Thank you.
Information.
I appreciate it.
So.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. A lot of people have probably never got to see Don Ghramm, and he's well known around here. And I don't know how many tournaments he's won, but he's probably won more than anybody in this state, or he's right up there. I have no idea. Maybe, he's probably too humble to talk, but his name comes up quite often over the last 20 years. So thanks for coming on with us.
You bet. You. Thank you, guys. And I'll see you at the next tournament somewhere, sometime. So I'll
Sounds
be there.
good.
Okay.
Good luck, you guys.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.